inspired the screenplay?
So many things. I mean, as you can see from it, but
right.
I mean, I have done telemarketing, and I think there were a lot of more grandiose ideas I wanted to talk about, but when you do that through regular dialogue or through, I'm going to set this situation up, so with some realistic things, so I make this point and you see the plight of it, it kind of gets boring and contrived, and so what I've always done with a lot of my work is when I want to make that point, I've been reality at a certain place to where been the reality of of the film, so that at that point that it bends, it makes you think about the reality outside the film.
Right.
So. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are like so many themes that I feel like you crammed into this, and somehow, like, even though it's like absurd in a lot of ways, it's very like real. The messages are very real. So when you thought about making the film, I assume that you had some big messages that you wanted to like put out there.
I think all I knew when I started making the film was that one, a film that happens in a workplace, you're already dealing with all sorts of dynamics, and you could just show the things that happen, and it would display a lot of things without even trying. But separately, I knew that I wanted to make it in telemarketing because I've done that. I had a lot of stories that could fill it. But also, I knew that there was going to be happening at a telemarketing place, and I knew that there was going to be a labor struggle that the main character had to deal with. That's all I knew. And I just always have to trust that if I'm being honest with myself, then my viewpoints about the world are going to be reflected in the work that I do, whether it's painting a picture or making a song or making a scene. And so I always have to look at what I'm writing and see if it and reflect on it to see if it's reflecting what I think the realities of the world are. So, and then that's just where the ideas come in at.
Yeah. Did anybody ever say that to you when you were doing telemarketing, that you needed to have a more white voice?
No, it would never be said. It's just something you pick up on. Yeah. Cool. You figure out what works. You see the people that are more successful.
Yeah.
Are able to do that. Yeah.
How was the collaboration process with the actors, and like, did you get ideas? Did you bounce ideas off of each other?
Yeah, I mean, definitely there was a great group of actors. Everybody that was cast in this, many of them are gigantic stars in blockbusters, and they all, first of all, came to this and did this for scale because they wanted the movie to happen. And not only did they do it for scale, they didn't come on board and be like, okay, you got me for X amount of time. They were like, look, let's figure out how to make this work. There was, with each actor, there was like, weeks or months of talking on the phone a lot and trying to figure things out. So like, for instance, with Lakeith, we got into like graphing out his posture development through the time, and and talking about different emotional steps and things like that. But and each actor is different. So like Tessa comes from theater and is has different processes that she goes through for that. But a lot of times we run through the scene while, stuff was getting loaded into a location or something like that. Run through the scene and then just kind of talk about the different points, and the different feelings. It was very collaborative. And sometimes they'd say a part and I'd be like, okay, that sounds stupid. That's like bad writing. So let's figure out something else that works here. And, so it was really collaborative. Sometimes we would just do the scene without any dialogue. And I used some of that sometimes. And then other times I would just not yell cut. And they would still keep going. And a few of those times got into the movie. And there would be improvisation, things would happen. That was really a big part of it. They all are masters at their craft. And the reason why they're masters at their craft is because, one, they're really great at working with other people.
Right.
And able to go back and forth about how to make this happen. Sometimes, so for instance, with I don't know, I just remember this one time, it's a very small thing, but ended up changing the scene significantly. There's a blocking when Cassius and Steve Lift are meeting in his office, and I had all this time thought that there was a moment when Steve Lift stands up, and I had this other blocking in mind, and Army was like, he just said, I don't think Steve Lift would get up. In that case, I was like, you're right, and that changed the whole thing. Whereas some directors would be like, you're the actor, do the thing that I said. But me, that's kind of how I stay in it. It's like I'm going back and forth. Sometimes I'm talking to the actor and being like, okay, what do you think Detroit is feeling right now? Trying to get where they're coming from, and then trying to figure out whether I disagree with that or I agree with that, and and then talking about it that way. And for me, it gets a better performance, from doing that, and from just being not worrying about exactly how it's coming out. There's some directors that are like, don't say I'm going to the store, say I'm going to the store, or something like that, And for me, it's more about what feeling they're putting out there and what's motivating how they're saying it. So even for me, even for times when I wanted them to go faster, I would create reasons that they are going faster, that their character, instead of just being because otherwise then it kind of gets like one of those old Parker Posey movies where something like that.
Speaking of Detroit, one thing that I really loved about this film is that she wasn't just the girlfriend or Cassia's conscience. She was those things, but she was also her own character with her own agency, which I've as women we see so rarely on film, so rarely. And in particular, I don't want to give anything away about the plot, but when she's broken up with Cash and she decides to do something later, most people I think would later in the film have Cash get really pissed off about that and really macho about it. And I so appreciated that it was just a thing that they talked about and then it was done. So was that a conscious decision when you were writing the screenplay, or is this something that happened more organically as you were filming?
The writing is organic, but it was definitely in the screenplay. It was definitely a controversial thing going through the labs, going through all of It was something that I had to fight for.
Thank you for fighting for it.
And, like people saying, there was even like at some early screenings where somebody was like, I can't, it'll
I can
spoil
cut
it.
it out. You can,
You can tell us.
A little bit. Yeah.
Well, no, there were things that people were like, there was a debate like among people that were well-meaning about, what did it make her look like, and all this kind of stuff.
Made her look like a kick-ass woman.
Exactly.
I want to be best friends with.
I know.
Yeah. So, that was that, and I had to put that for it, and I have to say, it started coming up again once, and because this is too much of a spoiler, but it started coming up again once Annapurna got it, but then it was we were at a meeting, people started raising that and saying, oh, we did this test screening, people are worried about this, and then Megan was like, that's staying in there. and then people couldn't talk about it anymore.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So that seems like it was a challenge. Was there any other big challenges you had?
To get it funded with most of what happens in the third act, like people, I guess we were looking for funders. There are a lot of people like, oh, you had me until that part.
Yeah.
And like, if you could make the movie just that part, then up till then cool. Like, you could end the movie without any of it. You could have the movie without all of that. So, that was a challenge. This definitely, like, the structure of the movie. Because, like, a lot of times when I'm talking about this, it gets talked about in, like, as, oh, that's the third act. But really, there's not really three acts. It's just, that's the third section of the movie. But there's, like, if you were to make there be acts, there's a whole bunch of them going through it. And, and so that whole thing, that was a big challenge right there. But, no, there's specific, a lot of those challenges came, like, during, as I'm getting notes on it and things like that. Stuff like, oh, why does it need to be overdubbed? But that's the whole point. It's a magic voice,
I love it.
Did you weigh in on Detroit's wardrobe at all? Like, did you choose, like, I know some of the earrings.
Well, the earrings were written into the script. I had that in there. Definitely when I cast Tessa, one of my worries is that she's a, very well-known person, and I didn't want people to just be looking and being like, oh, this is Tessa Thompson, and, so, she was down to change her general look, and so we sent pictures back and forth of possible hairstyles and this and that, and so that was, the one she really wanted to do. And it actually caused a problem with Disney, because, we thought we had to go ahead. She thought she had to go ahead. And then they were like, oh, no, she's doing, after she dyed it, they're like, oh, she's doing Thor reshoots. And so they had to, like Disney was all mad, and they had to make a $10,000 wig, which is nothing for Disney or whatever. But, and
That's true.
It even comes up, and I never asked Taika whether this is, but like there's a part in Thor where they see her and they say, wow, did you change your hair? So I'm wondering if that's from the
kind of thing the director would do.
That's awesome. What was the biggest success you had? One of the biggest successes.
In the film, so many parts that we pulled off that I love. Our production designer was one of the biggest successes, I would say, is her costume design. That was a collaboration between Deirdre Goban, our costume designer, and Tessa, and me weighing in. But it's also kind of goes side note to some of that. Like for instance, there are some things that like Tessa and Deirdre had Detroit in that like would be great if it was a female director. Like, but or if they were directing it. But I'm like, well, this is me. Putting this character out there, so it means something different, like something that would just, fashion-wise look great, but then there becomes a question of how am I envisioning that? So there was a sort of a strange thing going on. Like, there's one protest scene, and they had a great outfit for her, which had like fishnets and stuff like that, and I was like, okay, she's the only person in there with that, and if this was a character that was totally created by women, then that might be a different discussion. But since I'm part of it, it makes it sort of strange. So maybe we gotta do something different for that. So that those were the kind of discussions we were having with that. But but I think like her wardrobe was a big success. I think like a lot of the production design, like the telemarketing floor, which was just all the way built. That was a crazy success. The garage apartment transformation scene. That was something that, when I wrote the script, I had to figure out, I had to draw pictures on paper to make sure that I wasn't, going to be selling something I couldn't pull off. And it actually worked. And I don't know how to build shit or anything. And so, the production designer really pulled that off. There's an argument scene between Cassius and Sal that I was really worried about. That happens in front of the office building. And I was really worried about pulling that off because it's a tone thing, and so I was worried about it before the day, and then on the day, as we were running through it, I was even more worried because it just wasn't right, and then we were filming, and it just wasn't working, and just happened to be I think, and I don't remember what it was, but I figured out the right thing to say to them to get them to get on it. And that was a big improv point too, because there was a certain amount of it was written, and I realized that was it was such a great moment, it needed to go on longer. And and so the beginning part that they do on that was written, and they just went on and really nailed it and really nailed the tone, and that just felt like a really big success. There's other successes that I don't want to talk about right here, but that really ended up working out. So All right,
cool. What I know that you're, really in this film right now because it's doing the festival circuit. But what are you working on next? Can you tell us what you're working on next?
I can say that I'm working on a TV pilot and a feature film.
Cool. And music-wise?
Well, the Coup has done the soundtrack to the movie, which is different than the old album called Sorry to Bother You, but the new album that's all new music is called The Sun Exploding.
Very cool.
So, yeah.
Was it, I don't know if we have more time. Okay. Was it easy to go from songwriting to script writing?
Yeah, it's much easier for me. Script writing is much easier for me than writing songs. Often, when I'm writing songs, I'm taking ideas and situations and dialogue and turning it into poetry, which is a harder thing to figure out for me. I'm taking situations and dialogue and just putting them down. You know, I mean, then I have to figure something else out, but it just felt like I was skipping a step, so it felt like pretty easy.
Cool.
You know, yeah.
Awesome.